There's tons of these bizarre clips online of megachurch pastors tethered to the ceiling floating onto the stage or performing some sort of healing ritual, I think, behind the flashy showmanship and their questionable sermons.
I got my shoes on.
There's a cult-like structure that's intertwined with the religious ideology, and it's based around preying on the pockets of its followers. The megachurch crowd is quite different than the average Sunday churchgoer, and the pastors that preach to them emphasize that donations for religious reasons will increase their personal material wealth. And in this case, material wealth, especially financial success, is seen as a divine favor from God, which these pastors must have a lot of, right? Because they're claiming to be multi-million and billionaires. This approach to preaching Christianity is known as the prosperity theology, sometimes also referred as the prosperity gospel, the health and wealth gospel, or the gospel of success. It's been criticized over many years by various Christian leaders. They feel that it's contrary to the Bible, promotes idolatry, and just gives the religion a bad look overall. And idolatry is literally defined as the worship of cult images or idols as though they were a deity. Some other Christian observers have also criticized prosperity theology as just a means to exploit poor people, which pretty much sums up exactly what the crowd is like that you'd see at a megachurch. Not referring to every person in attendance being poor, quite the opposite, but everybody in attendance treating the pastor like it's an almighty being. These people are referred to as charismatic Christians. They're very passionate about financial blessings and the physical well-being of themselves and loved ones always being at the will of God. But to help God's will work just a little bit better and to eliminate these problems that are viewed as curses to be broken by faith, you must have strong visualizations, positive confessions, and most importantly, give a hefty tax-exempt donation straight to the church. The first megachurch was established in London in 1861, but didn't burst into the American consciousness until around the 1980s. A megachurch is defined by the Hartford Institute of Religion and Research as any Protestant church that has 2,000 or more people in average for a weekend attendance. But comparative to the 80s and early 90s, what differed from their predecessors was that they offered their participants a single organization to meet their spiritual, emotional, educational, and recreational needs. If you think this is starting to sound even more like a cult, just wait. In 1989, the vanguard of the megachurch movement, 37-year-old Bill Hybels, stated that we're on the verge of making kingdom history, doing things in a new way for a whole new generation. Saddleback Community Church's 33-year-old pastor Rick Warren, who at the time preached to around 5,000 members, made some similar statements. There's a trend all across America moving away from the small neighborhood churches to large and regional type churches. It's the phenomenon with malls replacing the mom and pop corner stores. People will drive past all the little shopping centers and end up going to the major malls, where there are lots of services and where their needs are met. The same is true with churches today, in that people drive past dozens of little churches just to go to a larger church which offers more services and special programs. It almost sounds convincing, right? A fun-loving Christian community, and hey, the bigger the better, right? But these statements overlooked the emphasis on preaching religion for financial gain and exploiting thousands of people's beliefs during vulnerable stages of life, until they end up worshiping the pastor as an idol. This is where we first become introduced to Kenneth Copeland. Copeland is the founder of Eagle Mountain International Church, which is located on a 1,500-acre property, which he refers to as a campus near Fort Worth, Texas. His vast wealth is largely due to him being a televangelist or a teleminister who is able to reach a worldwide audience through broadcasting his sermons live from the megachurch campus for TV and radio audiences, where his followers can also make financial contributions. Inspired by other questionable preachers such as E.W. Kenyon and Oral Roberts, Copeland boasts to have over $750 million in the bank. Copeland's rise to teleministry fame didn't just happen overnight. It started in the fall of 1967 when he enrolled in Oral Roberts University, where shortly after he also became a pilot and chauffeur for Oral Roberts himself. And if you're not familiar with Oral Roberts, he was the guy who claimed to have a vision from God that God didn't want him to be poor anymore, so boom, overnight instant multimillionaire. And starting that same year, Copeland released his own ministry that held 3 to 6 day conventions across the United States. And in 1971, KCM began 1-hour television programming called The Word of Faith. Shortly after, in 1972, he launched another television program called The Prayer Group, which was only a half an hour long, but all of this wasn't enough to make him help preach God's will for health and wealth. So he started the Kenneth Copeland Bible College, also conveniently located on his 1,500-acre megachurch campus. By 2008, Copeland's ministry owned 5 private airplanes and continued to purchase more, including a Gulfstream jet from the filmmaker and businessman Tyler Perry. Copeland used his church to raise funds for building a hangar, upgrading his own runway, and just the overall maintenance. Also in 2008, Mike Huckabee, a Republican presidential primary candidate, made 6 appearances on Copeland's program Believer's Voice of Victory, and he rented KCM's facilities for a fundraiser, which was heavily criticized by the Trinity Foundation. As a result of Huckabee's appearances on KCM was one of the 6 ministries that were investigated by the United States Senate, inquiring into the tax-exempt status of the religious organizations. KCM was one of 4 that did not cooperate or volunteer to make reforms. In 2015, KCM launched the Believer's Voice of Victory network on channel 265, which was on Dish Network. This was later renamed to just the Victory channel in 2019 and became available over the air on most cable providers. In that same year, Copeland, in a broadcast alongside fellow televangelist Jesse Duplantis, defended the use of private jets as a necessary part for their ministry. John Oliver heavily criticized the Copelands for using tax laws to live in a $6.3 million mansion, using church donations to buy a $20 million jet that was used for trips to a ski resort and a private game ranch, and for promoting healing through faith and skepticism of medicine. Copeland also sat on the Evangelical Executive Advisory Board for Donald Trump that was assembled during his campaign for presidency. Appointment for this board did not require endorsement of his bid for presidency, and Copeland clarified that he did not endorse Trump at the time, but before the 2016 election, Copeland said Christians that didn't vote for Trump would be guilty of murder, referring to the pro-choice stance of Hillary Clinton. In an interview after a state dinner at the White House Copeland attended, he said that Trump was led by the Spirit of God, and that the most important legacy as a president that would be appointed from Trump would be making conservative judges. Kenneth also claimed that he was able to cure COVID-19 by blowing the wind of God at the virus. He gained attention during the pandemic, arguing that pastors shouldn't cancel services, and repeatedly said that the pandemic had ended or would end soon. On March 29, 2020, in a televised sermon, Copeland executed judgment on COVID-19.
I execute judgment on you, COVID-19!
He claimed that because of this, it was over and finished, and that the US was now healed and well again. Following this sermon, he continued to claim that he could destroy the virus with the wind of God. And he even kept encouraging his followers during the economic hardships that were brought on by the pandemic to continue donating. Shortly after this, on August 3rd to the 8th, the Kenneth Copeland Ministries hosted a Southwest Believers Conference at the Fort Worth Convention Center in Fort Worth, Texas. Despite restrictions on social gatherings to limit the spread of the pandemic, no one was able to enforce the public health guidelines because religious gatherings were exempt under the Governor Greg Abbott's executive orders. Despite all these scandals, most televangelists who were around in the 70s are still in business today. Jim Baker, after leaving prison, brought back the Praise of the Lord Club and continues to run it to this day. Kenneth Copeland and his wife Gloria continue to preach the prosperity gospel, and the televangelism industry continues to thrive financially thanks to the internet. Televangelists are just salespeople and performers, presenting a product of their own to an audience, convincing them to pay for it. If these televangelists have done anything, it's that they've proved that Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard was right when he said, "If you want to get rich, start a religion." Jim Davis and Michael Graham, both who were pastors at the Orlando Grace Church, an evangelical congregation, raised about $100,000 to enlist the help of 2 political scientists who surveyed religious trends in the US. The 2020 Faith Communities Today study, for example, found that the median congregation in the United States stood at 65 people, down from 137 people in the last 2 decades. For a long time, the church declined and no one really cared, Burge said, and now people are seeing the decline and saying, wow, this is really becoming an issue. Whether you want to accredit this decline or rise to televangelists such as Kenneth Copeland, Copeland specifically has built vast empires and personal fortune by telling gullible people what they want to hear. He has a string of false promises and prophecies regarding things like Trump and COVID, and overall they prey on the weak and vulnerable for donations while they live in mega mansions with fleets of private jets. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. It takes a lot of time to research, edit, find clips, record the audio, do all that stuff. So if this video made you say, well, that's something, then we achieved our goal here today. If you could hit that like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, it really helps support this channel and helps us grow. As always, stay safe and stay curious, everyone.